Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Obviously, with the major Season 5 update here in Warzone, we got a pretty significant meta update. We had a couple of new weapons added in, and we saw various different changes, different buffs and nerfs to a handful of different weapons across a handful of weapon classes. I also had the privilege of sitting in on a dev call for Season 5, talking to some of the studio leads from Treyarch and Raven specifically, and they talked a little bit about the meta updates for Season 5, what their overall goal was. And now that we've seen the full patch notes release, of course, we've had time to test around with various different weapons. I wanted to break down this general meta update a little bit more, what it means for the broad meta and how it kind of is backwards, I guess. They say they're aiming for one goal, they're aiming for one thing, and it seems like a lot of the changes they're making in game are doing another. For instance, I have a couple of notes written down here while I'm looking off to the side here. One of the main talking points the devs shared with us in this dev call for the Season 5 Warzone meta is that they wanted to really focus on accuracy and trying to create a headshot skill gap, if you will. And this applies to part of the meta really well that we'll talk about here in just a moment. It also, though, is kind of flipped upside down when you realize one of the new weapons that we're getting for this season is the PML 556 LMG, which is one of the higher recoil guns that we've got in the game. So they say they want to focus on accuracy. They want to create a headshot skill gap. So they buff a lot of, accuracy based things on certain weapons, long range stuff, bettering velocity, bettering different multipliers to focus on accuracy that are all lower recoil options. Then you give us an option that is higher recoil, much more difficult to use, while also simultaneously buffing guns that are much easier to use, means that your brand new content that's supposed to shine with the PML 556 specifically is going to get overshadowed, even though it does have a decently competitive TTK. So I thought that was kind of interesting. They talked about how accuracy was a big priority for the season, but then one of the new weapons, one of the two brand new guns that's a big focus point, is anything but accurate, at least when it comes to initial control. You got to work to make it like that. So thought that was kind of backwards outright. There is part of the meta that actually does benefit a lot from this headshot skill gap. And while it's not mostly the rifles here because they just focus on range with a lot of those, the SMGs is where we actually see this quite a bit. So they mentioned they wanted to create this skill gap with accuracy, specifically in the close range. We have a lot of very competitive SMGs, and of course they went through and they knocked out the LC10 from being that #1 SMG. It's still a competitive choice. It's definitely not the clear #1 anymore, though. There are other SMGs that are definitely better than it, but they wanted to make it so that other options also were really advantageous if you had good aim here. So in addition to buffing the range on some of these, even though that wasn't maybe totally needed in some cases, like on the C9, which was already a very competitive SMG to begin with, they are focusing a bit more on ADS speed improvements and then headshot multiplier buffs. So the KSV sees that, the Ladra sees that, for instance, the LC10 sees a headshot multiplier nerf, PPSH headshot multiplier buff, etc. So they're focusing more on precise aim with these, and speeding up the ADS obviously going to get you on your target there with your sights on your target a little bit faster. So they're trying to emphasize that more, which is a good thing ultimately, but they did so in a way where they just nerfed one gun in the LC10, which does shift things out, but they don't really shake anything up outside of that. And again, they further monopolize the Black Ops 6 meta with this update. There are no changes here, obviously, to any MW2 or MW3 SMGs. And now these SMGs that are receiving buffs, which I do think is a good thing. We should see more buffs than we see nerfs on guns to begin with. It's just separating these further and further away. And like I've said before, if you're gonna have 150 plus guns in the game and insist on having all this carry over every single year in Warzone, you can't have 95 of these guns be completely useless because they're the old game's guns. If they're in the game, you might as well have them be competitive, and when there's exclusive focus to just Black Ops 6 guns this late into the game stage, it does monopolize that meta and I think make it a lot more one-dimensional. While yes, all of these SMGs here are practical, they are competitive, they are good, you have a lot of different choices depending on your preference, we're still straying away from an actual diverse meta. So there's some weird things going on there, but really where I feel like this meta is the most backwards based on what they want versus what they do is the long range meta and how things interact with that, whether it be the rifles, which we're going to talk on here for a little bit, but then also the sniping meta, which makes me scratch my head the most, quite frankly. And by the way, as we're going through all this stuff here today, if you guys enjoy this video, a like rating is always seriously appreciated. Lets me know you guys want to see more content like this, and of course it helps grow the channel as well. Speaking of growing the channel, if you're new here, feel free to hit that subscribe button, turn on those post notifications. Appreciate all the love and the support on the channel as of late, because we've been doing a ton of stuff, obviously with Warzone, but then Battlefield as well. Really do appreciate all the support you guys are showing the channel day in and day out. But if you want to help us get one step closer to 1 million, feel free to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date. With the long range meta here though, another big focus point that they gave us was that they wanted to do a lot of adjustments, a lot of buffs to assault rifles with better velocity and better flinch resistance and better flinch induction, basically, and infliction, whatever the right word is there, to help with sniper counterplay. They want to have a strong sniping meta, which we'll detail more in just a bit because, like I said, it's weird, but they also want to have strong counterplay to snipers so that it's not long ranges, snipers only, and if you're using that and you're good with them, then you're set, or you're just chalked because you're using a rifle versus someone who is good at sniping, right? But here's the thing that's kind of weird. They want to have good sniper counterplay, but what they've done here is opt for better range, better velocity, better flinch on guns that you're not always using in the long range meta. For instance, the AK-74 is the first one that receives these specific buffs: better range, better velocity, better inflicted flinch. But the AK is not a long-range weapon. Its recoil is too obnoxious to use at 60, 70, 80 meters effectively, especially against a sniper that's probably going to be on a head glitch or something. So that's a buff that makes the AK better, but it's not going to help out with that specific, situation that they're trying to navigate. The aim's sort of in that long range meta because it's a low recoil option, but its TTK is not competitive enough that this is going to be a top picked choice. AS Val not really meant for the super long range fights. The AMAX is another one here that gets better range, better velocity, better flinch. Again though, higher recoil choice, not one that's going to be consistently picked to fight at those super long distances. In fact, the main options that you're going to see there are things like the Kilo, the Grau, the Cypher, the GPR, none of which got those specific updates. And in fact, the Grau 556, if we go all the way down into the marksman rifle category, ended up actually getting nerfed here with worse damage range and then worse velocity as well. So that's taking away from that sniper counterplay. So that I thought was particularly interesting. They want more flinch induced on these weapons because it's going to make sniping harder if you're getting shot back at and getting hit. But these aren't weapons that are typically used to counter snipers because of the way that they behave in games. So again, I feel like that's kind of backwards and kind of missed the mark. And then we shift to the sniper meta, where the devs started out by saying this: we want to promote a much more competitive sniper meta, basically. And then they talked about how they were going to nerf the HDR. And I was like, okay, so you're going to nerf the number one choice, the clear number one choice. That's good. Surely you're also going to buff a bunch of other snipers and create a dominant long range one-shot sniper, like infinite range one-shot sniper meta where we have a bunch of different choices instead of maybe just the HDR and the Victus and the Cat being like the main ones, right? You'd have the LR762, the Frostline, other MW2 and MW3 choices, all able to one-shot over infinite range, and it comes down to feel, it comes down to velocity that differs between them. That would be a healthy sniper meta. Instead, all they chose to do here was nerf the HDR and then slightly extend some damage ranges on things like the LR762 and the Frostline, which doesn't really create a more competitive sniper meta, because you look at this and it's like, okay, yeah, my LR762 can now one-shot at 105 meters instead of 94. That's cool, but also the HDR still has insanely good velocity and can one-shot headshot anywhere. So they haven't given you enough of a reason to look at the HDR and turn away from that. It might not be as clear of the number one choice now, but it's still probably going to be the most picked sniper, even though something like the Victus or the Imperium can get better velocity or can also infinitely one-shot or whatever the situation is, right? There's still a monopolized meta here, even though they come out saying we want a super competitive sniper meta, but the clear answer seems to be, okay, make a bunch of different snipers infinite one-shots, and then you have a much more, tight competition. But then they don't do that. They take like the half measure step towards a competitive sniper meta by extending ranges and upping velocity on a few other choices. So again, their words, what they want out of the meta is one thing, but then what we see actually happen with some of the changes in game doesn't necessarily align with that. And that's kind of been the case here for a few meta updates in a row. So just an interesting observation, I think, from my point of view, and probably why I wanted to make this video the most here, just because it seems like we're trending in certain directions where there is progress being made, but they're being like super careful and super tedious about it. They're not going all in on the, hey, this seems like it'd be the obvious fix. Why not jump in, in the deep end, if you will, and go all in and see if it works. And if it doesn't, then you can just nerf things again. You can adjust as needed instead of barely making a dent. And then it just seems like we're having the same meta season after season, and it gets really monotonous. So while we did see quite a few meta updates with season 5, it doesn't necessarily feel like the top of the meta changed that drastically in the grand scheme of things. Just my 2 cents here. Would love to get your guys' thoughts on this general meta update, meta change down in the comments below. While you're down there, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like, and if you're new here, feel free to hit that subscribe button on your way out. But that's going to do it for this one. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.